why doesn't he just walk right through the election in 1968? What possible problem could arise from this model? I'll just give you a hint. The reason why he loses in 1968 is precisely because of the Great Society. Even though it was brilliant politically, even though it was a complete constituent change, and to this day, this is what defines the Democrats. That's why when you think who is it that's most pro-civil rights, you think the Democrats, because they have associated expansion with civil rights. But the same change led to his loss in 68. Why? Take a guess. What problem could come from this? You what?
Fix the problem.
See, that would be so perfect. That's kind of the fun. This is, just to let you know, this is kind of the Republican side of the argument. If you have a war on poverty that lasts 50 years, are you winning the war? So maybe there's a different tactic. You can't fix a problem. In fact, if you really think about it, if your way of gaining your constituency is to give them money, can you ever actually fix it? What happens if you do fix it? Let's say you are in charge of food stamps. You work in the agency that gives out food stamps. What happens if people no longer need food stamps? You're out of a job. It's kind of the nature of bureaucracy. See, the bureaucracy is created to serve a need. And you have this weird situation. Well, the federal government creates laws and gives money to support the bureaucracy. And the idea is that the need is what triggers the laws and the money. But if you are then hired to solve this need, do you really ever want to actually solve it? It's actually not in your best interest to solve it. You want more people to be on food stamps because then you'll have job security. I don't want to get too cynical here because I'm not intending to be cynical. This is just kind of a bureaucratic model. Let's talk about something like global warming. If you have a job where you're a biologist and you're an ecologist, which just to let you know, 20 years ago, you didn't get hired as an ecologist. But today, you can get hired as an ecologist. Your job is to kind of deal with environmental issues. What happens if someone says that there's no global climate change, or that man isn't responsible for the global climate change? Then what happens to his job? Because isn't he there in order to facilitate policies to fix the problem? Well, if there's no problem, what happens? You don't have a job. It's a weird situation where the bureaucracy becomes self-supporting. And so you don't really want to fix the need. And so your comments is actually really insightful, really, really insightful. Because if it did fix the need, it would really be a problem for the Democrats. But that's not the problem. That's actually not why he gets... Because what he ends up doing is that... And please, I don't want to be cynical because I don't mean to be this. This is just very political. Is that you're not bribing the urban folks, but in a sense you're guaranteeing that federal money is always going to go into this urban area. Most people, that's where these programs are going to be. So that actually creates a permanent constituency. And we know that's the truth because even today, if you look at every election, you're going to guarantee that the urban areas are going to go Democrat and the rural areas almost always go Republican. So what's the problem here? And I got 4 minutes. Actually, 9 minutes. Let me give you a hint. Okay, so funny thing is, so we say federal money will solve poverty, but it will also solve racism. There's two goals here. Now let's just pretend that you are black And your parents, so you're a baby boomer, just like everyone else is a baby boomer. You're a black baby boomer, which means that you're born after 1940. Now, your parents born before 1940. If they lived in the South, what did they have to suffer through? Segregation, there's no question. If they lived in the North, did they have to suffer through segregation? No. Were their lives always miserable? No. You need to understand that. I know that our dialectical model always says that every black person everywhere was always miserable their entire lives until, what, 6 months ago. But that's not actually true. Who's Louis Armstrong? Do you guys know? Jazz guy, right? Is he famous? Was he hugely famous? Of course. Cab Calloway? The fact is that a lot of black artists did very well. A lot of black businessmen did well. They're North, right? It was North. It didn't mean that you didn't have poor black people. You did. The point is, let's say that you're a baby boomer and you see these changes because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 basically makes it illegal to discriminate in any public transportation issue anywhere. The Civil Rights, the Voting Rights Acts of 1965 basically makes it illegal to put any barriers at all in voting. When this is done, there's really nothing more that can be done. All the legal possible loopholes that you could possibly have found in segregation have been wiped away. So when this happens, we should expect that these problems would be solved. And if you're a baby boomer from the age of, say, 18 to 21 or 22, your age, how much experience do you have in change? Not a lot, right? So when you see these things happening, what are you expecting will follow? Boom! We got this law passed. We have been waiting for this law forever. Not only do we have this law passed, but we have a major Democratic Party that had always been supporting segregation is now realigned. And so now it is supporting civil rights. And the Republicans have always supported civil rights, so who is against civil rights? Nobody. So, what should we see in 66? Shouldn't society be perfect? I mean, really? Is there nothing more? There's nothing more you can do. But you guys are not stupid. I can pass the law. I can make sure that I say all these things. But why doesn't society become perfect? Say you're black and you go in the South. And legally, this guy cannot force you to sit in the colored section. Legally, you can go anywhere you want to. You can buy anything you want to. But what hasn't changed? The guy who was a racist in 1960 and in 62 and in 63, is he suddenly not a racist in 66? No. And even though I say the society was mostly in favor of segregation, don't get me wrong, you still had jerks, big fat jerks. People that were genuinely racist for whatever reason. Whether they blamed it on their economic situation, whatever, it didn't matter. The fact is you still had some of these guys. And they're still there. Not a majority by any, not even a strong minority. In fact, a tiny minority, really tiny minority, but they're still there. So you're a black guy going in the South, and somebody says, "Hey, boy," but diminutive, like, you know, you're 35 years old, you still call him a boy. "Hey, boy, come on over here, shine my shoe." Guy says, "Are you kidding me? Do you know it's 1966? We don't do that around here." Can you expect a tiny bit of frustration? Let's say you are poor and you're living in a slum in New York, which means there's never been segregation, legal segregation there ever. You've always been able to vote in New York City, and you're living in a slum, and you've got these two laws, And LBJ is there, we're going to fight poverty, it's a problem, it's our fault, by the way, and that's why we have to fix this. And I get up and I'm still in the slum. It's 66 and I'm still here. So, what's the problem? Can the law actually fix social problems that quickly? No, you're dealing with a change of attitude. And how long does a change of attitude take? You guys actually know this answer. Because you guys were all born, some of you were homeschooled, some of you went to public schools, some of you went to private schools, and I'm going to bet $1 million that when you were in kindergarten, they told you about civil rights, that when you were in kindergarten, they told you about Martin Luther King, what a great guy he was, that when you were in first grade, you celebrated Martin Luther King Day, you had some project in class talking about how civil rights is a good thing. I'm going to bet that never in your life have you had a teacher tell you that you should stay away from black people. Have you had a teacher tell you ever? No. So when you guys come in this classroom, am I worried that any one of you could be secretly a racist? No, absolutely not. Can I tell you a secret? I told you I was born in 1969. I went to an almost all-black elementary school. They bused me 5 miles. This was busing in the 1970s. I was on the school bus for 45 minutes every morning. I went to it had 60% blacks. They couldn't have more than 60%. So they bused white kids into this black. Now the funny thing is, it was probably one of the most prosperous schools because they had so much federal money. This was in Tacoma, Washington. So much federal money to help. So I had computers in 1976. I had these wonderful math programs on a typewriter. Really, really cool. And there's like a whole row of typewriters, and there was a computer that would feed the typewriters math programs. And so the typewriter would print out a math program, and I would answer it. And it would tell me how many I got wrong, how many I got right, and how much time it took. This is amazing stuff. There was another computer where there was reading, and I was learning how to read. So I got gobs of money. It's a mostly black school. Do you think I had any teachers ever that told me that I should stay away from black people? Now, I'm 46 years old. What's the only way that you can actually change hearts and minds? Can you do it by a law that says this is going to happen and boom, the next day it's going to happen? What's the way, how does it work? Time. The reason why LBJ does not get reelected is because that time doesn't help him. You get radicalism. And radicalism are people that want changes now. And they start spreading up. The funny thing is that radicals are not there during the civil rights movement. It's only after you've gotten the milestones, you've gotten the big laws, then they're popping up all over the place. And their answer is, well, we need to do this now. Riots. There were between 400 and 600 riots a year. You guys are talking about the Ferguson riots and the riots out in Philadelphia today, or Baltimore, right? These riots were going on constantly. You see pictures where they say, oh, is this 1968 again? That's what they're talking about. In 66, 67, 68, there were hundreds of riots. LBJ is able to make this switch, this realignment. What does Nixon have to do in order to win? And this is the last statement before we leave. What does Nixon have to do in order to win this election? He's kind of lost the civil rights thing, even though the Republicans have always been known for civil rights. Because the Republicans tend to not support federal money, if you do not support federal money, then you look like you're a racist, right? So he gets screwed on this. But he has an ace in the hole. And the ace in the hole is that he stands for law and order. And the Republicans begin to realign behind law and order. And when you do this, you're going to win. And he wins in 68. And why do we get a huge landslide in 72? Because the crime rates literally went down. And why is it such a big deal about Watergate? What does he stand for? We'll talk about this on Monday. Questions, comments, words of wisdom? Read on 72 and Watergate. Yes, you can read on Watergate. Although I think we'll probably do Korea and Vietnam as well. But go ahead and read that whole period from 68 to Watergate. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. We'll cover it.